Okay, hi everybody in ICD. Now, I'm going to recap the my various lawsuits against ICD, which I'll basically be using as an example to demonstrate how this is, systemic within the IMF, the World Bank, the UN. This is going to be particularly problematic for you all with how the WHO, World Health Organization, has been involved in dropping the ball on the COVID epidemic and their response. This ups the ante, of course, to genocide with all of you all. The numbers are just escalating, but I know you all don't care. You're too much in your ivory towers and enjoying your little vacations on taxpayers' money to care. So, I did the whole workplace bullying report that was submitted to IMF HR, Mark Plant, director, and Kalpana Kochar, director, afterwards, which of course was swept on the carpet and just ignored, rendering them complicit to all the penal offenses going on. Same with the mediator, Gita Ravindra, the ombudsman, Olivia Graham, and there's Olivia Graham's the ethics, and then there's the ombudsman, and I can't remember, and then there was a special investigator who also got a copy. Everybody just ignored it. That's fine, become complicit. I don't know why you guys thought that I wouldn't throw the IMF, the World Bank. I'm already know of my beef with the UN women and how they're in bed with the alpha dominant feminists and managerialists and the affirmative action of people, and they're going down with all of the women's rights NGOs, which are actually alpha dominant feminist NGOs, which are the motor behind the escalation of violence really around the world, particularly within the Muslim countries, because that's where their focus is to, bring their alpha dominant feminism into the Muslim countries and incite the violence there and try and get everybody fighting and fighting and fighting. That's their objective. And Effie Salita's son was killed by that. See, it's killing your own children, but obviously that's your pocketbooks and your fancy homes and your consumerism is much more important. I even told, Mark Lewis is throwing his kids under the bus along with his ex-wife by covering all of this up. Well, you guys want to make your beds, you're lying. So, when the altercation, when Adrian happened in the coffee shop when I was working in ICD, this was spring 2015, and that's when she, got angry and decided she was going to get rid of me. But, after all of the labor rights violations I'd already been through and discrimination in ICD, was just up the ante and gave me all of the smoking gun things that I need to bring you all to court. So, here's the background. The right of passage and right to protest dead and buried in our nation's capital. This is posted on the Huffington Post. There's, you can scroll down on post a list of all of this with links. So, the other day I was passing through a coffee shop whose entrance adjoins the entrance to my office building. The entrance to the building was blocked by construction, so I naturally passed through the closest available public access, the coffee shop. A common banal act that should never pose a problem for any citizen exercising his or right of passage and liberty of movement, or so I thought. As I was attempting to pass from the coffee shop to the building, the manager physically blocked my right of passage. I questioned his action and then denounced his right to prevent me from exercising my rights in a public place. But in order to avoid an altercation and lower myself to his level of ridiculousness, I left the coffee shop, accessed the building through another entrance, and filed a complaint with the building management. The next morning, as I entered the building by the non-offensive entrance, I kindly called attention to my efforts towards keeping peace and harmony by discreetly utilizing this entrance and not creating further issue with the coffee shop manager, but that I did so under protest, as is my civic right and duty. Considering the case closed and not giving it further thought. A few days later, I was shocked to learn that the coffee shop manager and building management had taken contention over my right to protest and my right to denounce the incident in my blogs or on the internet. I further learned that they were initiating bullying tactics to prevent me from exercising my right to freedom of speech. But what shocked me even more was the reaction of people who jumped at the chance to rationalize why I might have acted in a way that created or inflamed the situation. That I, the victim of clearly inappropriate, if not illegal, behavior, was guilty of the altercation. Push buttons in me that were better left untouched. The freedom of movement and freedom of speech are quintessential in any democracy. And while the illegality of what the manager did is dubious under today's political climate, I know for a fact it was illegal 30 years ago. The denigration of rights in this country, and particularly in D.C., has occurred for the simple reason that it has not been challenged by the legal or civil and human rights community and press, domestically or abroad. Greenwald explained the dangers in this type of political climate in his book, How Would a Patriot Act? Ultimately, people will get the government they deserve. And our system of government and the individual liberties it so brilliantly guarantees will endure only if Americans, who are the beneficiaries of those liberties, take a stand for them and are willing to defend them when they are under assault. Robert Reich reiterates this same sentiment in his blog, A Crisis of Public Morality, Not Private Morality. At a time many Republican presidential candidates and state legislators are furiously focusing on private morality, what people do in their bedrooms, contraception, abortion, gay marriages, America is experiencing a far more significant crisis in public morality. I was floored, putting pressure on me to recognize my guilt so that the abusive and offending party's reputation and or pride might be restored. C'est le monde à l'envers. The very people who should be bending over backwards to diffuse the situation and hope that I would just walk away were doing everything to call me out for a duel. This was like when the British asked John Paul Jones, my great-great-great-granduncle, okay, that was written, is not direct line. When I looked into that in the ancestry, the connection to the Paul family with my father's side, his mother, would have gone back to Scotland, so it's not a direct line. Sorry. See what happens when you don't do your homework and you just jump to an assumption and don't check the facts. So I admit, I made a mistake. See, it's not that big a deal. It's no big deal. you made a little mistake. It's not the end of the world. So I admitted it. I didn't die. To surrender in the battle. So this was like when the British asked John Paul Jones to surrender in the battle between Serapis and Bonhomme Richard, calling attention to the fact that his response to this type of bullying was, "Surrender be damned, I have not begun to fight." See, about us, of global expats, that gets into my, when they seize my assets, and all of you guys sanctioning seizure of people's assets and Paradigm that does that, and you do it at a drop of a hat, it opens the doors for your assets to be seized. You don't protect other people's property rights, you can't expect people to protect your property rights. What these people are doing here are exactly the same bullying tactics I have been confronting in the Spanish judicial system for the past decade, with the Spanish government utilizing the same rationale to justify their illegal action. It's their right because they can. No one is stopping them, so why not? This is the mentality that reigns in our societies today, and why the world is in such dire straits. Well, journalists, it appears, have woken up to the hypocrisy, double standards, and corruption amongst elected officials in the legislative and executive branches. They have not yet woken up to the fact that the same phenomenon exists within our judicial branches, at a rate of 75 to 95% in Europe and North America. This means that not only are 70 to 95% of criminals set free to roam our streets and continue their crime sprees in these countries, but the people incarcerated in their place, with the numbers in the tens of millions, are being locked up and tortured for nothing. And guess what? For anyone who gets in a civil suit these days, including business deals and contracts, you too are exposed to this elevated negligence of the courts and extortionist tactics of lawyers and the courts. The world is truly at a crossroads of humanity. And unless the legal and human rights community, as well as the mainstream media, begin to take an interest in and become complicit in the issues with real live cases, rather than empty rhetoric, false promises, and hot air speeches, our democracies will continue to be under attack from global right-wing extremism and terrorism. In the case at hand, the coffee shop and building management are very aware of the fact that I have no legal recourse within American courts today, and even less the laughable Better Business Bureaus and consumer protection agencies. In his book, With Liberty and Justice for Some, Greenwald exposes how this multi-layered justice system functions. Separation of elites from ordinary Americans intensifies as one moves down the rung of power and privilege. The rich and powerful are able to commit crimes with impunity, far more easily than middle-class Americans, but similarly, middle-class criminals are far more likely to escape unpunished than the poorest among us. Well, yeah, the farther you get up the chain, the more impunity you enjoy. But see, like with me, that can disappear in a second. That's why the lawyers in Spain, blocked all my assets and refused to find any information, financial information. They wanted to totally, defraud me, and then they knew the social order would take care of the rest and would destroy me. And, as my ex-husband said, I would end up committing suicide. Now, a lot of people do, But nobody's driving me to that. Even that's what, that's been the objective from all the landlords I've had and all the places that I've worked since I've been back to the States. See, nobody wants to talk about the hate crimes of the blacks and the browns towards the whites, and that's what is inciting the white supremacist violence, because it is going on, but nobody will. That's where, Trump is right. Trump is right in some of his stuff. Now, what he does with that, he's just like Rush Limbaugh. You take a little thing, or any of these extremists, the right or the left, they take a truism and then takes it all over to La La Land with their alpha dominance psychopathic reasoning. So, in the case at hand, the coffee shop and building management are very... In essence, court systems work much like our lotteries and financial markets. It's a pay-to-play game with winner take all. And the cards stacked in favor of the rich and ruthless. And for the poor schmuck at the bottom of the totem pole, there is always solace in the trickle-up reality that yacht makers and the like will never be unemployed. Or as Matt Taibbi puts in Gritopia, what voters don't realize or don't want to realize is that the American dream was abandoned long ago by this country's leaders, who know the more prosaic reality and are looking beyond the fantasy into the future, at an America plummeted into third world status. These leaders are like the drug lords who ruled America's ghettos in the crack age. Men and some women interested in just two things: staying in power and hoovering up enough of what's left of the cash on their blocks to drive around in an Escalade or 630-30i for however long they have left. Our leaders know we're turning into a giant ghetto, and they are taking up every last hubcap they can get their hands on before the rest of us wake up and realize what's happened. The international community and everybody in Washington is just here to cash in. I mean, I've been knocking at doors, trying to build coalitions, writing and researching, and while everybody else is partying. I mean, hours and hours. Administrative function is very, very important, guys. All you bigwigs think that you know everything and everybody's beneath you. Well, I've showed you guys. You're all over the map. You don't understand anything. All the PhDs and MBAs in this town just cashing in, and everybody down is the trickle down of cash in, cash in, cash in. Yeah, it's all a joke. So who cares? Just don't tell anybody about the joke, and just keep your head down. You get your cash. You collect yours, and don't make waves, and you'll be fine. But see, it always ends up with the raping and pillaging with this laissez-faire government. So, and in the meantime, you are assisting in the destruction of the American economy and social order, and subversion of the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, which for Americans that gets into treason. Everybody that gets into RICO and Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. With Americans that gets into treason, we'll talk about the international conventions another time. And all of the foreigners that are participating in this, simple. What you're doing is illegal. Seize your assets. Out. Clean up this town. Drain this swamp. But perhaps there is poetic justice to my story, and karma wins out in the end. I live in hope, at least. Since consumer protectionism is an oxymoron in today's world, with expatriates particularly exposed to abusive practices of retailers and the problem of nowhere to turn for justice, and do not expect any assistance from your consulates, the interactive Yellow Page business model, now called local search directories, that I was creating almost a decade ago, is now one of the most successful social media business models on the internet. My silly altercation with the coffee shop manager just demonstrates the dire need for a website such as globalexpats.com. And my entire Global Expats project and everything that I'm doing. Pam Perot of Federation of American Women's Clubs overseas in 2007 said, "You're just reinventing the wheel with another expat wives club." I said, "No, lady, I'm fixing the wheel." All of the FACO, they're in bed with all of the corporate greed, and IMF Family Association, World Bank Family Network, and UN-LESA are just all in bed with all of the corporate greed, the government greed, the greed all over the place, and desire to destroy the world. The hypocrisy. Oh, I know there's maybe some people of good faith in the organizations, but it doesn't matter. I mean, why isn't anybody, getting together? And the workplace bullying report that I did, I'm sorry, is just as good as all of the other reports that I'm doing. If you really cared about the mission of the organization, you'd be all mobilizing and getting your asses to management, to the staff associations, cleaning up your family your family associations. Those ladies are screwing you people over royal. They should be on top of all of this instead of going shopping and going to their country clubs and trying to get into the ruling elite Americans. I mean, the funny thing is the IMF Family Association, if they hadn't pulled all the crap and, kissed my ass and gotten involved with the global expats, my lord, do I know all the ruling elite of this town and this country? As Doug Shar, son of Dwight Shar, the real estate mogul. Look him up if you guys don't know who he is, you Americans. You should know. Northern Virginia Homes of D.C. Believe me, Douglas told me a thing or two about his father. But he told me one time, he said, you never know if your friends are your friends because you got the $1 million homes and you got all the money. And I said, Doug, you don't have any money. Your father has the money. But of course he said, well, yeah, but, they had this beautiful, oh my God, the house out on Rehoboth Beach. I went out there. I didn't stay there, but, yeah, I did love that house. It was beautiful. Sure, they got a lot of nice homes, but, this is why I left the States in the 80s, and all of my former classmates, my sisters, my brother, all jumped on board, my entire family, both my father and my mother's side, have been part of this. Oh my lord, my mom's one of the deep state members in the construction of the, Nancy Reagan, just say no to drugs and control freak bitches. So anyway, they would have had, the entire ruling elite of Washington eating out of their hands. Instead, they wanted to get on board with the game of everybody, whatever. I mean, I won't sell out. And Gita Ravindra said if I was more conciliatory, maybe I would get farther in my work. No, because I'd have to sell out to the right or the left, just like everybody else has done. No, I'm trying to avoid violence and the destruction of my country and Europe and the entire world, while you guys are trying to drive us off a cliff. So, it is what it is. You guys, as it says on my War on Domestic Terrorism website, you choose the side of the oppressor and become complicit. There's only two sides to this thing right now. And there always has been. Yeah. So, I know, where I see black and white, everybody sees gray. Where everybody sees gray, I see black and white. It's always been like that. So, this banal story is also once more proof as to how all too many people in our society today, given a little power, will use it to manipulate, harass, and bully people, rather than help, assist, and support others. Instead of wasting his time bullying potential clients, this coffee shop should have taken advantage of the fact that they had traffic being literally forced through it. Instead of wasting his energy on negative vibes and chasing away potential customers, the coffee shop should have concentrated on raising sales and capturing clientele from their competitors across the street and around the corner. Karma, n'est-ce pas? What is truly revealing here is that the building management was not in the least concerned with the violation of my rights, or even about informing themselves as to real facts of the altercation. Their only concern was that I might pose a negative review on the internet, a public shaming for the world to see. It was no longer the threat of a civil lawsuit that intimidated this retailer or building manager, as it was the case 30 years ago. These days, special interests, in bed with lobbyists, civil rights orgs, are a dime a dozen in D.C., with their primary function, it appears, to keep poverty prices up in DuPont Circle. I've been knocking on these doors for 6 years, and they are all just part of the facade. Unfortunately, due to runaway corruption in the courts, the only recourse for citizens and consumers apart from mob rule is on local search directories, like globalexpats.com. As Jennifer Jaquette explains in Is Shame Necessary? New Uses for an Old Tool, exposure is the essence of shaming, and a feeling of exposure is also one of shame. The emotion, most distinct ingredients. Let's see. Exposure is the essence of shaming, and a feeling of exposure is also one of shames, the emotion, most distinct ingredient, and ultimately leaks shame to reputation. But shame can also improve behavior. The competitive edge expat moms around the world have in confronting the present global economic and political crisis is that expat moms control about 10 trillion USD in global consumer spending annually. Noting that 10 trillion is almost half the GDP of Europe, half the GDP of the USA, and total GDP of China. Now that's a lot of power in countries that need a lot of change. Expat Women United have the potential to become a formidable economic and therefore political force. They just need leadership and direction. No other group of consumers hold the economic and therefore political power that mothers and homemakers hold in today's world. And it is high time that we start exercising and utilizing that power to create a new, more peaceful, harmonious planet. As the managing director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, stated in her speech, Daring the Difference, the 3 L's of women's empowerment. Remember, women control the purse strings. They account for over 70% of global consumer spending. So if we want more spending and more economic growth, then we need to empower more women as agents of aggregate demand. I don't know if my altercation with this coffee shop manager is a sign from God, karma, or just a funky, funny coincidence. But after almost a decade of tilting at windmills and filibustering the State Department and White House with my incessant letters, I am starting to feel a shift in the winds of war. Perhaps in the upcoming presidential elections, we'll start to see some real discussion on the real issues facing this country and world, rather than a bunch of backstabbing, back-scratching manipulations from a bunch of empty-headed bullies. We have enough of that on every street corner and coffee shop in this town. Thank you very much. So that was posted in, I think this would have been April 2015 on Huffington Post. Well, obviously we did not get a, what was it, robust, what did I say? Robust or discussion, debates on the real issues, and things are just getting worse. I'll show you an SNL clip. But they're just getting worse and worse and worse. Like the last presidential debates, and you can even see on I saw at the beginning of 2016 when Sean Penn came out with the El Chapo Speaks articles in the Rolling Stone magazine, and everybody started bashing him. And I mean, the idiots who were saying you're not a journalist weren't journalists themselves. So that sent me off. That set me off on all of the 2016 blogs that I did. It was Sean Penn. I did the Court Watch for Aaron Eddy, Harper Lee's passing, because my grandfather was the first white lawyer to successfully defend a black man in the United States in 1910. So, you know, I've always been interested. I mean, and To Kill a Mockingbird was one of my favorite books growing up. Always had a lot of significance for me. And our family was always my father until he was Stockholm Syndrome from my mother, right-wing extremism, racism. It was, you know, that was something that was extremely important in the family, was combating any kind of discrimination. We joined the Country Club of Tucson because they didn't accept African or blacks. So that was very important, and always has been. Then I went to the spring meetings, of course. That's when I started connecting all of the dots of what's going on in the IMF and the international community. Up to that point, I had been looking at family courts and all of the international conventions and human rights aspects of that. But, you know, my research was, as it always is, expanding instead of just rewriting the same things like you guys do, and thinking that you say it long enough and loud enough, people are going to start doing it. It doesn't work like that. It's like going into a classroom of a bunch of kindergarten kids and thinking that you're going to just sit there and say, okay, now everybody's going to be nice, and you're going to read your book. They'll create as much chaos as you guys are creating right now for the same reasons. You don't have the basic skills of a 6-year-old. So, I wanted to here. This was too precious. It was the Saturday Night Live 2020 presidential elections. I was looking at that this morning. And, I mean, I just can't even look at the, at the news anymore.
The day of the 2020 election. For the first time since October.